頭集第83則六章風番六章大師ちなみに風節番のあぶ二層あり大論数一層いわくはた動く一層いわく風動く往復して勝った今で理にかなわずそういわくこれ風動くにあらずこれはった動くにあらず人者の心動く二層正然たりEntangling Vines, Case 83. The sixth ancestor's banner in the wind. The sixth ancestor saw a banner flapping in the wind. Two monks were arguing, one saying that the banner was moving, the other that the wind was moving. They argued back and forth and were unable to agree. The sixth ancestor said, "It isn't the banner that moves, nor is it the wind that moves. It's your minds that move." The two monks were astonished. Quietly, the snow is falling outside. As if it was blanketing the just freshly received corpse of the Buddha, who we commemorated this morning. And if you listen carefully to what was read, you will have taken from it a very, very important lesson. And not only a lesson, but a message. So, who was there when the Buddha died? Any idea? Anybody here? No. But who? Ananda was there, yeah. Ananda, one of his disciples, and of course, probably many disciples. What is the name of this group of disciples? The Sangha. So the Sangha was there. And the Sangha usually referred only to the people who were ordained. And after lying there, the Buddha said these wonderful things. Oh, it's not snow that's falling on me, but it's sandalwood and flowers. And you people come and throw them at me. But that is really not the most authentic way of venerating or of honoring what teaching I have brought to you. He said the most important thing, especially, and he didn't say it out loud since I'm gonna be out of here pretty soon. The most important thing is that the bhikshus and the bhikkhunis, so those are the ordained folks of the Sangha, but also all the lay people, those who are not home leavers in the same sense, those who have families parents to take care of, children, jobs, and so many responsibilities. The true way of honoring the Buddha, his life and his teaching, is to walk this path yourself. It's quite important to see that message. There's no distinction between ordained and not ordained, between male, female, non-binary, or any other kind of identification. Old, young, or anywhere in the middle, no difference. But while we are alive, let's walk this path. And let's walk this path together. Our companions on that path might disappear, like the Buddha disappeared. And we always hear about transmission and the intransmissible way of the ancestors and Buddhas. We just chanted it in Japanese, part of this last admonition of Kozen Daito Kokushi. There's one part where it says, Fuden no Myodo, the intransmissible way. Before it says Busso, so Buddhas and ancestors, this intransmissible way that we living beings carry. That is really the message that the paranirvana is meant to give us. While we will miss those who depart, we always, by that transmission of life, carry them with us. So, as it goes for me, I can only say one thing to Buddha, Shakyamuni, Siddhartha, who made this path be widely known to all of us. And that is just, wow. It's the feeling, it's the same feeling like when a really beloved friend of yours gets you into deep trouble. Because that path is really not that easy. It is not easy. And then it gets complicated by these entangling vines that we're talking about here. Entangling vines making it even more complicated than it need be. But after all, human beings are kind of a species that lives in this kind of a thicket of sharp thorns at times. Our minds are sharp. Our judgments often are sharp. And our opinions often are quite rigid. And we all know that we have a very, very dynamic part as well, that at times cannot move the way it naturally moves because of these vines that are not alive anymore, that have grown into a briar of dry, wooden, barbed wire-like fashion. So how do we get out of that? That is the question that we face in this practice. And it's a question that generations and generations of practitioners have faced. And no matter how careful we are, it is very difficult to get out of those thorns without a scratch or two. All right. Before we go to the koan, I want to acknowledge that we are finding ourselves here in very, very interesting times, in very challenging times from all sides. And it reminds me of Jizo Bosatsu. Jizo Bosatsu. And Jizo Bosatsu does one thing that is particularly interesting. You know where Jizo Bosatsu goes to work? Huh?
Hell.
Hell, that's right. Jizo Bosatsu has to go down all the way to hell to help to pull people out. So here we are sitting in the United States, in New York City. And we don't even have to do that. It's so luxurious. Hell came to us. Aren't we fortunate? We saved a lot of walking. It is right here. So let's see what we can do in this, what feels like hell. So today we meet a very, very famous koan. A very famous koan that is also one of the beloved koans of many Zen teachers. It is the wind and the flag. And it is the sixth ancestor, Daikan Eno Zenji, who appears in this context. So let's think a little bit about, or let's visit his personal history of that person, Daikan Eno. So Daikan Eno, or Eno Daikan Zenji, lived from 638 to 713 in the Common Era. We usually call this time the Tang Dynasty. And he is kind of an interesting character because there is very great significance to his life and to his teaching. Of course, we find many, many records of the sayings of monk X and monk Y, like the record of Rinzai, or the record of Baso, and so on. Whatever the name is, the sayings of so and so, like the Rinzai Roku, or the Kido Roku. Sometimes it's called also Goroku, word, the collection of the words of Master so and so. And a similar thing exists for Eno Daikan. But the interesting thing is that it is entitled a little different. In Japanese, it's called Rokuso Hoho Dankyo. And we know it in English as the Platform Sutra. Well, how is that different? How many other collections of the sayings of a particular person do you know that are actually called a sutra? The sayings of the Buddha are the sutras. And then comes the sixth ancestor, Eno Daikan. And his contribution is so important that the Platform Sutra is called a sutra. It's quite revered. Often when you buy a book in English, you find the Platform Sutra together with another sutra. And you Everyone has a book like that? Yeah? What stands with it usually? The Diamond Sutra. The Diamond Sutra and the Platform Sutra are often translated together. And it happens to be that the Diamond Sutra was very important in the life of Daikan. So the Kongo Hanya Haramikyo, the Diamond Sutra, together. It's all about the same teachings, teaching of Prajna Paramita. Prajna Paramita, Hanya Haramita. What is Prajna? Wisdom. And wisdom is the sixth of the six perfections, of the six paramitas. Remember the other five?
Patience
is one of them, yeah. Kshanti. Usually we start with dana. Yeah.
Virya.
It's there too. Usually the second one is sila. Shila. Precepts. Third one.
wisdom.
That's the top. Now we get to Kshanti, which is Kanti, Kshanti, which is forbearance. And then comes Virya, number 4. Now we 4 or 5. And number 6 is Prajna. Jhana is somewhere in there too. That's number 5. But it's the top. It's like an accumulation. One builds on the other and all leads to itself. Prajna, the sixth of the 6 perfections. We have the Prajna Paramita Sutra, which is about 8,000 lines. It's quite long. So we here chant the Cliff Note version of it, the Heart Sutra, condensed in a much shorter number of characters. And what it has, what is the main point of the Heart Sutra? Where does it culminate? Of course, in the end. Gate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. That is the mantra of the Prajna Paramita Sutra. Over, or beyond, beyond to the other shore. Prajna Paramita, the great wisdom. So what does it have to do with Daikan here? Daikan, what we know about him is that he could not write, he could not read, he was illiterate. He was said to be illiterate. Which seems strange if you know that his father was an exiled court official. Because in the Confucian system, in order to become a court official, you have to jump through all kinds of different trainings, hoops, and writing and reading certainly was part of that. So it seems interesting. Maybe his father was banished fairly early, before Daikan learned how to read and write. So his mother was left behind. And as a good son, he cared for her by gathering wood. There are wonderful Chinese brush paintings where you see Daikan, as a younger man, cutting bamboo. Yeah, bamboo is considered wood. So he would cut that and bring it to the marketplace so he could afford to bring something back to his mother. And one day, in the marketplace, he heard a a Buddhist monk chant a portion of which sutra? Yes. The Diamond Sutra. And there in chapter 10, there's a place that is pronounced here in Sino-Japanese, we pronounce it Omu Shoju Ni Shogo Shin, where it is told that bodhisattvas should develop a mind that does not alight on anything, a mind that does not dwell anywhere. I have always wondered about that. Because even now, if you hear Omu Sho, well, those are sounds, right? What are the characters that they stand for without really knowing what the characters are that they stand for and then looking them up, basically? It's very hard to know what this is actually intellectually saying. And for somebody who can't read and write characters, it might be even harder. Or it might be easier, because he grasped and lit up from hearing that, because there was no mind to alight anywhere, that became one with that embodiment of the Diamond Sutra by that person chanting it. So he walked up to that person and said, "What is that? What is that?" "It's the Diamond Sutra." "Oh, where did you learn that?" "Well, I studied with Gunin, the fifth ancestor." And Eno Daikan decided, I should go there. I should go there and see. It wasn't close by. You know, China at that time had different empires, different emperors here and there. People in the north, in the south, and so on. And it's interesting that in many countries, just the geography is enough to discriminate. So he encountered Gunin, and Gunin says, "Where have you come from?" You know, I'm from the south. I'm a simple commoner wishing for nothing more than to realize the Buddha Dharma. Gunin, but you're a southerner. You are a barbarian. Barbarians, how can you become a Buddha? Eno replied, a person may be from the north or the south, but Buddha nature has no north or south in it. Gunin was intrigued. So Eno joined that monastery of the fifth ancestor. And he wasn't ordained either. He was a lay brother. Okay, you can stay here, make yourself useful. He was assigned to work for the Tenzo, helping to hull the rice. And he worked in the rice hulling shed. And there was a contraption that is used to hull the rice, where the person, with their weight, steps onto a wooden treadle to make that contraption move. And having grown up quite poor and being of rather short stature, it was difficult for Eno to get that thing actually to move. He wasn't heavy enough. what did he do? Because he didn't want to leave, he found a rock and tied it to himself. So he could step onto that drum and make the machine move. This is a wonderful point in Zen practice. Why did Gunin not just say, go do Zazen? No, you go to the rice shed. Why do we have Samu? Why do we do prostrations, Kinhin, and all of that? At Daigosatsu Zendo, sometimes we do, not lately, but sometimes physical labor. Even at that time, in the 7th century, it was important to get people out of their heads and back into their bodies. That's what this kind of work is really, really important for. We have another contraption that helps us get back into our bodies. And we ask for it to be administered to us. The keisaku, the stick. Yes, there is a body. There is an embodiment. The Buddha said, in this fathom-long body lies the world, the beginning of the world, the end of the world, and the way that leads to the end of the world. It starts and ends with the body. So observe yourselves in the morning when you wake up. Maybe take a breath or two to appreciate that we have a body. And to observe where the thinking comes in that judges that body, which for many of us stands so firmly for who we believe we physically are. From the beginning, it starts with birth in a bodily manner that we come into this world. And the last thing that remains is a body that ceases to work in this miraculous way, that it sometimes works for decades and decades, sometimes only for very short times. In that span, that is the time the Buddha asks us to walk that path. So, connecting to his body, he worked there as the lowest person in the monastery. Didn't matter to him. And of course, Gunin was already quite advanced in age at the time. And he was looking for succession. Who will be my successor? And to identify the successor, he asked people to provide a verse that expresses their understanding. So let's see how that turned out. So if Eno is on the very bottom in the monastery, who is the next one below the abbot? The head monk. So the head monk here, by the name of Jinshu, of course he would be the first candidate for this kind of succession. But he wasn't quite sure about himself yet. So instead of just providing a poem, he decided, well, I'll just write it on this wall here and let it be found. Then we'll see. If it's good, I'll step forward and identify myself. If it's not so good, nobody has to know who did this. Sounds familiar, huh? So, he wrote the verse on the wall. And we've probably all heard it. The body is like the Bodhi tree. The heart is a bright mirror on a stand. Heart or mind. The heart-mind is a bright mirror on a stand. Every day, wipe clean the mirror so that no dust may alight. In the morning, Gunin was walking by that wall. Oh, a poem. He read it. And of course, instantly understood who had written it. Yet he did not have to out that person and announce who it was. Nor did he criticize it. We know this person did not become the successor of the fifth ancestor. And so often when we read over it, we assume it was no good, that poem. But here's what Gunin said when the poem was discovered and everybody knew it. And he said to his assembled disciples, light incense before this verse. Learn it by heart and recite it. Anyone can truly practice it, and anyone who does will avoid the error of ways that lead you astray, and in time realize Buddha nature. So Jinshu's verse is not wrong. What does it describe? It very much describes the practice in life and in Zazen. The body is like the Bodhi tree. When we sit down in Zazen, we firmly get rooted in the ground. At the same time, like the crown of the tree stretches towards the light and the air, it becomes open. With this, our heart-mind becomes a bright mirror on a stand that sometimes mirrors everything perfectly. And every day, wiping it clear by doing Zazen, by sitting down, no dust stays there forever. So it's quite useful. Of course, Eno could not read it. He had somebody read it to him. And then he asked the same person to write his response next to that poem. And what Eno had written there is no Bodhi tree. The heart-mind has no stand. When there is nothing whatsoever, what dust can alight Where? So let's not think about those 2 points as opposition now. Because when they are seen as oppositional, we are just in the same conundrum these 2 monks are in. So we all know the story that Gunin then at night had Eno come to his room and gave him the robe and the bowl as a sign of transmission and said, you better get out of here, because there are some people who will not believe that I gave you transmission, and they will be coming after you if you stay here. Take it and run. So Eno ran, disappeared. It was discovered the next day that he had gone, and of course the folks could not explain it, and so they thought, well, he must have stolen the robe and the bowl and just run with it. So scatter, find him. And one of these folks was a former general, the elder Myo, who actually was good in tracking people, and he caught up with Eno. There's the whole story that you find in case 23 of the Mumonkan about the Honnorai no Memmoku, the true face, where the pursuer catches up with Eno, and Eno puts down the bowl and the rope on a rock and says something that is also important, that the Dharma is not to be fought over. The Dharma is not to be fought over. He puts it down. Please take it. And this former general, a strong person, tries to lift it, and of course he can't. He asks Eno if he could study with him. I'm not here to fight. Please teach me. And there is this advice or the question that is given to the pursuer, Myo. Eno says, think not of good, think not of evil. At this very moment, what is your original face before your father and mother were born? Honnorai no Memmoku. Of course, think not of good, think not of evil, again points to this oppositional nature in which we spend a lot of our time. Eno also was advised to stay and clarify his own understanding by himself before going out to teach. And in one of the teachings that Edo Roshi gave, he says, well, actually, after spending 10 years, or was it 15 years, Eno felt he was ready, and he returned. And he walked towards a monastery, and it was supposedly the very day he had left his solitude, when he came to that monastery, and outside there was the flagpole, and these 2 monks were arguing. It must have been that there was either a sesshin was going to happen, or there was a talk to be given. Because what happened at that time, it was customary to hang up that banner so people would know, okay, talk is on. It's like putting one of those sandwich boards out here on the sidewalk. And here were the 2 monks, and they were arguing. One was saying, it's the flag that is moving. The other one insisted, no, it's the wind that is moving. And they argued back and forth, and they were unable to agree. This arguing back and forth is something that is known to us in our own mind. And we should actually be quite familiar with how easy it is to find oneself suddenly on the opposite side. And that's how it goes. Suddenly, when the first monk says to the second, yeah, you're right, it's the wind. That monk turns around and says, no, you are right, it's the flag. And it goes on and on and on. So here comes the sixth ancestor, fresh from the woods, saying, it isn't the flag that moves, nor is it the wind that moves. It is your minds that move. The monks were astonished. They probably invited him to come into that monastery. This is where the koan ends. And we can leave it with a superficial understanding and just think, yeah, it must be the mind, because it's just an opinion. It's just a point of reference from which we find ourselves. And as I said, sometimes we move sides, so of course it is the mind that moves. But that still is just something that is not yet fully realized and actualized embodiment of Zen. It's your minds that move. It's like giving a monkey a banana, feeding just what the mind wants. It is me. And so many discussions back and forth over many generations. At the same time, in China, around that time, there was another Zen master, Tosan, who lived on Tosan. And monks went from monastery to monastery, from temple to temple, to learn more and more, and to visit this master and that master, to clarify their understanding, and to hear their talks. And so one day, 17 of those monks were on their way to Tosan, and they came to the foot of the mountain just at the time when darkness fell. They stopped at the gatehouse and spoke to the gatehouse keeper, who happened to be an elderly nun. Whenever you hear about elderly females who appear in Zen stories, you know that the monks are in big trouble. And let's not be discriminative here. It has nothing to do with age, but it has to do with some aspect of somebody or something that does not fit the stereotypes in which we like to live. So this elderly nun said, well, it's too far. It will be very, very dark halfway up, and the steepest part with the drops on the right and the left, where you could just fall down the cliff, is just, it's not good to go tonight. You should stay here. So the monks said, okay, we'll wait here until the morning, and maybe you can offer us some dinner. And she said, of course I would. And so while the monks were making themselves comfortable, taking their hats off, their straw sandals, sitting there and drinking some tea, and the dinner was being prepared in the kitchen, they discussed something. very lively discussion about this koan, this very koan. Is it the wind? Is it the flag? Is it the mind? What is movement? And all kinds of metaphysical talk was going on. And they were just really into it. And so this elderly female came out and said, well, what are you talking about? And the monk says, oh, well, it's nothing. Go back to the kitchen. We are hungry. So she went back to the kitchen and she continued cooking and then brought it out and they ate and were happy. And afterwards she came out again and said, so now that you have eaten, tell me what you were talking about. Oh, we were discussing the koan about the flag and the wind. If the wind is moving or the flag is moving. And then they presented some of their views. And she was just shaking her head. Oh, no. It's not the wind. It's not the flag that's moving. It's not the mind that's moving. All it is "17 enlightened beings suddenly from that demonstration but it is so fundamentally the teaching of Eno that is expressed in this. The teaching of Zen, it's not even an embodiment. It is just and if we say anything about it, it is not. And that is true for everything. The Diamond Sutra shines through this so clearly. A flag is not a flag, therefore we call it a flag. The wind is not the wind, we just call it the wind. The mind is not the mind, we just call it the mind. This practice leads us back to what it is before it is named. Not that we have to discover new names to lead us to something new we have to discover, but just even more fundamental. To be able to feel, to be able to be, to be able to function in that fundamental authenticity that is before any naming, before any opinions, before any self-referential consciousness. The body is the Bodhi tree. Even those are words. Become the Bodhi tree. Let your mind be a mirror on a stand. Let the dust come and go before it's ever called dust or mirror. Don't think about relationship. Don't think about love. Just